Thank you and welcome to the Attleboro School Committee meeting of Monday, December 5th, 2022. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. We're going to start tonight with our Student Advisory Council update. For that, I'll turn it over to our student representative, Zachary Medeiros.
Hello, thank you for having me again. I apologize for being missing at the last meeting. But we're just going to show a little video that was made to show off the school's new, it was at this rally we had a couple weeks ago to show off the new mascot, and not only just that, but also show just like the school spirit and what the students have been up to recently as the year has started to go on. So we can watch.
Ready to begin.
Yeah, we got the entire student body to fit inside of the gym. It was a little bit of a squeeze, but we managed it, so that was pretty nice. So the rally or assembly was also mostly student-run too. You can see like right here, that's a student speaking, and there's several others that also have mics that'll speak at various points. We had, as students were coming in, the band performed for them, and the cheerleaders also performed afterwards. So we got multiple parts of the student body together to bring this whole thing together, which I thought was really nice. Yeah, everyone was really excited. There was a lot of people in there, so a little hard to calm everybody down. But So it was kind of like a little soft rebranding that we had. It wasn't like a total swap in the mascot or anything. And it was all brought on by the marketing CTE classes. And then those are the students that are speaking and running the whole thing from the marketing classes. this video was made to show off like everything that's been going on at the school, our core values, and just to put it all together to show off our new branding. I think the video came out pretty well. I think it has a good balance of everything that's going on. It's not too heavy on just the football team or the CTE department or anything. I think it brings everything together really nicely. I think a lot of students liked this part of the assembly that's about to happen here. Yeah, the new mascot costume showing off at the screen raising like that. I thought that was pretty cool.
We were working out the new technology system. So yeah, they had a bunch of like T-shirts and stuff with the new mascot and the logo on the back that they just threw into the stands like at a baseball game or something, which is pretty cool. So just one cool thing about the mascot, I'm pretty sure we're having it right. We have more than one person that wears it at different times. So, you know, we give multiple people the opportunity, both boys and girls, whoever wants to do it and is up for it.
So I just thought that video was really nice to show everything that's going on and just show the community that we've been building this year. So just a couple other things. The student equity group that's been forming that I brought up at the last time we were here. We still don't have all the information yet, so we're gonna hold off. Probably the next time we all meet, we'll have the information to share out. And then also tomorrow, Ian and I have our bi-monthly Student Advisory Council Zoom meeting with representatives from around the southeast region of Massachusetts. So we can give you an update on what we've been doing there at the next meeting as well. So unless anyone has any questions, that's all I have.
Any questions?
Just a comment, because I was fortunate enough to actually be present for when they did the mascot reveal. And walking into the cafeteria on my way into the gym with the band playing and all the students, it didn't sound like a high school. I thought I was walking into some college activity. Like, it was really impressive. The kids were really excited. Everybody was excited. So again, just kudos to all of the marketing department, the CTE programs. I think carpentry had to say, TV and broadcast. It was a good way to like blend all the different programs into, to put the rebranding out there. And everybody it was overwhelmingly positive, as you could tell. The video doesn't show just exactly how loud it was in there. It was deafening. So it's really cool. It was a really cool thing to witness. So nice work, everybody.
Thank you, Zachary. All right, moving on in our agenda tonight, first item of the business agenda is regarding the copier lease. 13 copiers throughout the district that need to be replaced to reach the end of their useful life. The lease for the 13 machines would be $3,758.07 a month for the full term of the lease, which includes maintenance, toner, and supplies. Mr. Furtado, did I miss anything there?
You did not.
Right.
Very accurate.
Thank you. I read it from your memo, so it's good to know. So I'll entertain a motion to grant the district permission to enter into a 42-month lease with Konica Minolta with pricing for the lease per the state contract.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have our superintendent's report. Mr. Sawyer?
Thank you, Chairman. I have two quick updates before we get to tonight's presentation on the budget. On the Apogee front, as I like to talk about every meeting, parents this weekend received communication from the schools notifying them of a workflow in Aspen that allows them to update their contact information. We're trying to make sure that everybody has the right phone number in for their mobile phone because notifications for a school cancellation this winter will be sent out via text message. So it's really important that the district has the right number as the mobile phone. The fields that we've been using in the district for a long time predate people having cell phones. And so some people have their home phone in that. Of course, at this day and age, a lot of people don't even have a home phone, but there hasn't been real clarity in terms of what number needed to be in your first phone number spot. And so we've clarified that we're looking for a mobile number, and we think we've made it pretty easy for people to log into Aspen and go in and make a change. We're also allowing for people to give a cell phone number for the students in their household if they want their students to have access to that information as well. And also, especially at the high school, we know that we'll be using Apogee for communication in our athletics programs. So, for students who want to get the text from the coach, one of the reasons why we went to Apogee is so that all of that is done on a monitored system and is all archived. So if there's ever a concern about, communication between staff members and students, we want all that communication to be happening through Apogee so that, as a protection for both our students and our staff, if it's on the app, then if it's through that system, we'll have a record of that, and we can go and check the record and see what was really said and be able to investigate any claims that someone's done something that they shouldn't have. So if we get to a place where everyone's using that, that system. We'll be able to tell parents what we've wanted to for a long time, and we're not quite there yet, but the goal here is to get to a place where we could say, if a staff member of the Attleboro Public Schools is contacting your child outside of our email or Apogee system, that's a red flag, and you should report that, right? Like, we're trying to get to a place where we don't have to allow our teachers and coaches and other employees to have to use their own devices to communicate. That's why part of why we're paying for the service. So for that to get to there, the high school students have to give us their mobile phone numbers so that the coaches have those numbers and can use the system the way that we intend. So that's why parents, when they're putting in their mobile number, are asked to provide cell phone for students. Now, as the kids get younger, we get into middle and elementary school, that's less of a concern, but certainly people can give their numbers if they want to. There are teachers in our middle schools who are ready to use that as direct communication with students in class. So, we're slowly building up our capacity to use these technology, but the high school in particular needs the cell phones for the kids. And across the district, we need all the parents to provide those mobile numbers. So that communication, requesting that, the link to the workflow went out this weekend. We're asking people to do that quickly. I mean, there's no snow in the forecast yet, but we've certainly had December snow, so we're really trying to get this in place. And next week, we will notify families in the district that we're running a test, and then we will send out a test message, and then people who don't get the test message will know that there's a problem and can contact their school to address whatever is getting in the way of that communication. So that's our big plan and our push in the next week to try to make sure that we have everyone's correct cell phone number in the right field so that they can get the test, so that they know that when we really do have a cancellation, that they will get that information in a timely fashion. So I'll pause there to see if there are any questions about any of that.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. So I just wanted to verify if a parent has forgotten their password or they're having difficulty logging into Aspen, is contacting their
The school.
school's administration still the best way?
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
No, thank you. Okay, then my only other update this evening, I just want to let you know that I attended a meeting of the department heads in the city today at the library. Mayor Hero provided some details on his transition, went over some of the logistics of it all. I have to admit, I didn't know that the powers of a acting mayor are more limited than those of an interim mayor, and so there's a little bit of discussion about some of the implications of that, because certainly there will be an acting mayor in the city between Paul's resignation and the special election, which hasn't been set yet. The municipal council still has to pick that. And that is an impact on the schools because we do have 2 polling places, so we are waiting to find out exactly when that is so that we can make the proper arrangements. But we're anticipating a good month in which the city is going to have some limitations on what it can do efficiently as a result of those conditions. So that was one of the things that was discussed, and I found that very helpful. And the other thing was, Barrow explained that he wants to put together comprehensive transition documents, so whoever ends up being mayor has good information on all the ongoing projects in the city. And so each department was asked to compile a list of all the various things that we're doing with the city. So Mr. Furtado and I will be sharpening our pencils and making sure that we try to capture all the things that we have going on, and it's a pretty extensive list. But I do appreciate the mayor's attention to this because we certainly don't want his departure to upend any of our plans. The city certainly is very supportive of the schools, and we have a lot of projects that are important to us in the works in various stages, and I don't want any of that to get lost in that transition. So I thought that was good news that there's plans on how to capture all that, and we will do our part to make sure that all of that is captured in writing.
Ms. Frompier?
Were there any restrictions on how the school system's gonna run? Is there anything we won't be able to get approval for in that interim?
Yeah, most of the implications for the city actually don't impact us. So there's a lot of issues around hiring and firing with an acting mayor. And we don't go through the city's system through that. and also some concerns about appropriating funds, but again, our processes are a little bit different when we're spending money within our budget. So it would impact any project that we were asking for additional funds for. And there are some, we're working with the city to get funding for repair for the Willett roof, air conditioning at Willett. We're looking at walkie-talkies. We're looking at video systems for the rest of the district. So we have a bunch of things that we are looking for money on. Some of those things we're going to try to get taken care of and voted on before his departure to get ahead of that, and others will end up having to wait until we have a new mayor to get funded as a result of his departure.
And I just have a follow-up as well. Are there any concerns about the snow removal budget, or are we all set for the 45, 90 days, however long the interim is around for?
Well, I'm assuming there isn't because Mr. Fedotto hasn't mentioned that, but I'll put him on the spot.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a profound concern about snow, excuse me. Because we're working through a bunch of logistical issues with this building in particular. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that it doesn't arrive anytime soon. And when it does arrive, it arrives once or twice, not 15 times. So yes, we definitely have a concern about snow removal this year.
Let me make it more specific. Sorry to keep taking the time. Are there any concerns about our ability to pay for it if we go over our allocated budget for snow removal during that interim period?
Historically, when we've had bad winters, essentially we pay our bills, and then if there's been money needed at the end of the year, the city will provide it, but it's not, they don't want to hear it until May or June.
Okay.
In terms of that issue.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, so then moving to the major business for this evening. Tonight, we kick off this, the FY '24 budget planning. I wanted to just start by reminding the committee and anyone watching at home that's maybe not familiar with the process, why we begin this so early in the season. It's just December. We barely started this year, and all of a sudden we're talking about the budget for next year. And one of the things that was very clear early on in my move to central office was that once the governor's budget is published, right, when the cherry sheet gets produced, as they call it, the number that Attleboro is facing is pretty much set at that point. The funding that's available is limited at that point, and while it will change in the margins, it can go up, it can go down, the city could pay more or less, and then the budget process at the state level can produce, usually it would go up slightly, but more or less, these changes are, as I said, marginal and pretty minor in comparison to the overall number. And so when we would have budget discussions as part of our process in March and April, we were having discussions that were, in a sense, ineffective because the amount of money that was really on the table to be discussed had been set. And so a conversation about, what the school budget should be didn't make a lot of sense because we already knew what the number was. So why talk about what should is when you know what is. So we decided that we needed to have a conversation about budget priorities and bigger picture issues ahead of the budget being set by the state, so that we could have the space in which we talk about, again, how things ought to be and what the needs are, independent of what realistically is going to be a number in a given year. Because once the number gets set, then really, it's about delivering on what that number is. And that's a very different discussion than the one that we want to have at this stage, which is, what are our needs and, how do we want to set our priorities to make the greatest progress towards our goals as a district. And so that's the purpose of tonight's presentation, and I will turn it over to Ms. Regan to kick off just exactly how we do that.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. So tonight, we'll be sharing information about the budget, what we believe our budget will be based upon what our current projections are, our priorities, especially in a world after COVID or post-COVID, and how we're going to continue to maintain our progress moving forward with the priorities that we've identified. Our goals are to see where we are right now with our current budget, share information moving forward specific to each of the different departments, and then, as Superintendent Sawyer said, really talk about our needs based upon where we are as a district. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Furtado to start to talk about the impact of that.
Happy to do so. While the medical emergency that COVID presented is waned, the impact of the pandemic has not. So we continue to struggle, especially with hiring of employees. In some cases, I can attest to being down a person for 8 months in my business office, which was a very difficult process. And in other cases, we don't have the luxury of keeping that position void until we can find somebody. We have to provide services to our students every day and have to find alternative resources to provide those services. So in our case, in the current fiscal year, we have approximately 25 vacancies in critical need positions for providing services to students that, from a salary perspective, would have been about $450,000, $500,000, and from a contracted service provider perspective is almost $1.5 million. So we've had to, use the word creative. We've had to get creative to kind of address that budget need, because again, we don't have an option of not providing those services to our students. The other part that this committee needs to keep at the forefront of your thinking is we continue to live on ESSER funds. Those were established 2 years ago, provided incredible protection to the district for structures and people. Those will expire in September of '24, and those structures and people supported by those funds will also need to be addressed. For the current fiscal year, our net school spending number, which is not our total budget, that's the total budget minus transportation, is $86,500,000, with another $4.4 million in transportation, for a total budget of about $91 million. In the current fiscal year, ESSER is supplying a significant amount of administrative support and student support through things like the ABA, through our family engagement program. All of the associated systems, especially with the ABA, online curriculum, et cetera, are all supported through COVID grants. And then we have an extensive amount of paraprofessional support in our elementary school at the lower grades, which has proven to be invaluable, also on COVID grants. So total ESSER spend for last year was $2.3 million. A similar number will be the case for this year. Additional COVID-related liabilities, transportation, we've had almost a doubling in the number of McKinney-Vento students. Nothing you could budget for or anticipate. We certainly expected an increase, but to have the numbers double has been a little overwhelming. And we continue to address air quality issues in buildings.
Mr. Geddes?
Just a quick question related to all of the ESSER funds. So you said they're set to expire September 2024, which would be part of FY '25.
Right.
Have you gotten any indication from the state that they may be able to provide any bridging of that gap, recognizing this is really a year away from them planning for FY '25, but has there been any indication that they're planning to help with that at all, or?
I think that was addressed last year when they took ESSA 3, and it initially was going to expire in June 30th, 24, and they extended it through September, understanding that to start the new fiscal year, coming off of that support may be a challenge. And that's kind of been their only indication that they understand it's going to be difficult out there.
But there hasn't been any indication that they recognize it's going to be difficult and are prepared to support financially? There hasn't been any of that?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Next year, in this context, next year, we're anticipating about 2.6 million in ESSER spending. We still have no reliable read on this building, how it operates, what it's going to cost, especially in the context of utilities. Very critical, but our construction partners carried those bills through August, and it's only December. We haven't even hit a real heating season yet. So to have any understanding of what this building is going to cost just doesn't exist yet, so we still don't know anything about that. We still are growing and developing our CTE programs, curriculum and materials in the district, and are looking at a middle school Attleboro Community Academy model for students in that, at those levels. Additionally, it's a contract year for all of our labor unions. As most of you know, having served on the committees, we may be facing some make-buy decisions, transitions with some of our bargaining units. That'll be part of discussions in the Finance Committee, which will come out to the full committee when it's kind of hatched out well. And the city at this point has no indication whatsoever as to what's going to happen with health insurance, although we have a strong indication that, there should be no expectation that it'll be zero. So in doing a level service budget for '24, we've made some assumptions about employee contracts. We've looked at health insurance, and right now have a number of 4%, with the notation that each 1% equals $140,000 in new spending. We are assuming that the, quote, mayor's commitment that's been a carryover from Mayor Dumas and through Mayor Haru will continue, which is $2.35 million above net school spending. Historically, we have enjoyed the release of the governor's budget in January. DESE has already warned us that that's not going to be the case, given that it's a new administration. They are not going to be in a position to release a budget, certainly not in early January, and DESE is hinting probably not in the month of January at all. And then we go through the legislative process after that, which will probably be more like May and June, and then the reconciliation process, which will likely be June, July, depending on how deep the issues go. I'm happy to report the district enrollment has recovered above pre-pandemic levels, so we'll see some benefit to our foundation budget because of that. 21 versus 22 is up 60 students, and our 22 fall census put us over 6,000 students. Now, we always talked about 6,000, but it's always been like 5,800, 5,900. We are officially over 6,000. So we're looking for the '24 budget from the state side to have a bump in it for student enrollment. We are also expecting a bump through the CTE programs that continue to develop. For a level service budget for '24, we're going to need just over $95 million, which is a $4 million increase from our current funding levels.
So that's total, not just net school spending?
That's total.
So that's compared to the 91 million, just
Yeah.
because of, for people watching, the slide that we started with was at about 86, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
And just based on the impacts of CTE and enrollment, that's going to take $1 million to $1.5 million out of that $4 million need. Now what's going to happen with the general increase on the Chapter 70 formulas and what the new governor's orientation will be to school spending will determine our sort of situation after that.
So I'm just doing quick math, that's about 4.6%, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Domenici?
So there is, we don't know it yet, but the expectation is that with the Student Opportunity Act, there should be additional funding coming from the state for the next several years.
So one of the things Governor Baker did last year for the '23 budget and why our increase was so substantial was he fully implemented SOA. So unless they are going to deal with issues like inflation, our SOA funding is sort of complete for in '23. That's one of the things they did to overcome what they did with enrollment, which was use unofficially low numbers on purpose.
That part I get. I thought it was supposed to be implemented over like a 6-year.
It was, but things were so dire.
But they just said, here's everything all at once.
Yeah, and they were in a financial position to do that. They had an extraordinary year last year from a tax revenue perspective.
Okay.
Mr. Larson?
Thank you, first. Kind of looking at the $3 million gap, I still get very concerned, and I think I made the same statement a year ago, that we're funding our budget with one-time ESSER funds. And I know we're going to just do that because that's what we're going to have to do, and at some point, those end, and we're going to have two problems. We're going to have the natural increase of things, and we're going to have to make some hard decisions on things that we're funding through ESSER right now to decide how to fund or how not to fund. And I think it's an important part that people need to kind of keep in the back of their mind when they look at this first step, that there's a two-part step coming a year from now.
Right, that's over $2 million.
Well, you said 2.6
Right.
for this next year, so I mean.
The other point that's important to note, our utility contracts, our commodity contracts for gas and electric expire for gas in the in the late spring of '23. So we're going to survive the current heating season with rates that are pretty good right now. And the new contract will not be as good by any stretch of the imagination. And then electricity is about 8 months after that. So those, which you're all feeling at home with your most recent gas and electric bills, we'll be seeing that in our utility bills in fiscal year '24.
One of the, looking at the $3 million gap, hopefully state aid will make up a bulk, if not all of that, we can dream. But, going back to the beginning of the presentation, there, $1 million and, of that gap, it looks like is these contracted services we're having to go out for because of staffing problems. So, right, I mean, we're paying 1.5 million or 1.45 million for contracted services that we would pay 450,000 if we could find the employees. So what are we doing, is this unique to Attleboro, or is this something that, like, we're seeing in the private sector as well and across the state? What are we doing to try and address that issue, if anything?
A couple of things. So first of all, I think it's, statewide, if not, countrywide. It's, everybody's having problems, especially in the areas that we are struggling with, trying to provide support services for students. That's been a, broadly talked about concern all over. The assumption in the level service budget is that we have employees in those spots, not contracted service providers.
Oh, so that's assuming we fix that problem, we're still 3 million?
Yep.
Okay.
And if we can't fix that problem, we're 4.
What's that?
And if we can't fix that problem, we're 4.
Or something like that, yeah. I know the folks involved with bringing those providers on have worked furiously at trying to find people. Again, it's widely reported in the private sector as well as in terms of this kind of attitude toward employment by the employees now, when they wake up on Tuesday and say, hey, I'm going across the town for another job that's, $100 a week more. There are no barriers to moving, and it's happening at incredible rates and without any notice. We're really getting caught frequently by people just getting up and leaving.
Mr. Geddes?
Thank you, Mr. Withers. Mr. Sawyer, you had sent a memo, and this may flow into the next part of the presentation, so if you tell me to wait, if you answer this question by listen in a few minutes, that's fine. But you referenced a memo, or you provided a memo that detailed where we are short in staff, in maintenance, devices, facility improvements, et cetera, at a total of over $9.6 million. Does that include funding the positions and expenses that are currently covered by ESSER funds, or is that in addition to those?
So the, for instance, the paraprofessionals who are currently working in the district that are funded by ESSER are part of that $9.6 million.
Okay.
Because they aren't in the budget, because we're not paying for it with, our budget funds, we're paying it with one-time ESSER funds.
Right. And I just wanted to make sure we were, yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, so what are our priorities given this moment that we are in right now? Every day our teachers continue to address and scaffold the new learning for students, in a post-COVID environment. This is just one of the many areas that they have to really work to support our students, including social emotional supports, behavioral supports, and I know you've heard this before, but we continue to provide high quality learning experiences with less than average resources available to us. And so I just wanted to make sure that addressing the learning gaps that were even before COVID, but in a post-COVID environment, is at the top of our list. With that also comes reaching appropriate staffing for our support personnel and for our most at-risk students, particularly our special education students, our English language learners, And then along with that becomes support for our inclusive practices, including special education. And as Mr. Furtado referenced earlier, we are in this brand-new building and still are trying to really get our, wrap our hands around how much it'll actually cost for us to be in this building. One of the other goals is, as mentioned already, is to absorb the supports that we've provided just through the ESSER funding alone, and that includes the paraprofessionals that were referenced, the family and community engagement support personnel. Ms. DePalma has been working really hard to put in the supports and community resources in place and make them available to all of our families. She's also starting to create the environment that she has, designed for the past year, and now that we're here in this building, she's putting it into place, and it's becoming an invaluable resource to many of our families and students. We take a look more closely at special education, recognizing that we have new students moving in every day, and the services and programs required to support them continue to increase based upon that enrollment. And then also, as Mr. Furtado already mentioned, having ABA continue to be funded, including staff and the learning management system that's associated with that. So given those goals, our top priority is staff, recognizing that we need support personnel and support services for all of our students. The creation of the middle school ACA to support our most at-risk students. And you've heard us speak about this before, but we are in the process of redesigning a middle school schedule and want to include band and chorus within that to provide those opportunities during the school day, which will then support our high school program as a whole, particularly at the across the district. And again, absorb the operating costs in this building. And so the big takeaway, which is no surprise, two major things here. We need to make sure that we continue to prioritize staffing first, and then take a look at the areas that ESSER funding has been keeping us afloat for the past couple of years, and really start to absorb those costs. My Boston accent's coming out in all these words. So, as Mr. Furtado mentioned previously in the presentation this evening, we're not exactly sure when the budget will be coming out with the new administration, and hope that we'll be able to follow the same timeline that we have in the past. But we're hopeful that we'll be able to do that. So I'm going to hand it over to Superintendent Sawyer.
So it's a broad overview of our best estimates in terms of what we are facing and what we think we can expect and how this will all play out. But as I said, when the governor produces her budget, then that will basically set the mark, and at that point the exercise really becomes doing what we need to do to deliver on as close to what we're saying we think we need to do with the funds that we're going to get. Because really the point I want to make this evening is that our problem isn't a budget problem. I've been involved in enough of these budget seasons to really come to the realization that the city does not have the resources to address the real problem. And so it budgets, I think, reasonably what it can. Now, could they give more? In any given year, there's always you to give more. But the marginal difference between what we get and what could be given would not make a difference on the larger scale, because When we look at the real problem, which I'm hopeful that this slide helps to capture, this is really about funding, not budgeting. When this data is available from the state, it's taken right off of their website. This is data from FY17 to 21, so the last 5 years. 21 is the most recent one in which there is state data available. Obviously, we have our numbers past 21, but there isn't for the state, so 21 as far as we could go. 5 years ago in FY17, the per pupil expenditure for the Attleboro Public Schools was $13,315.47. Now, that's the blue line that you see crossing the graph, and the scale of that is on the left side. That's marked in tens of thousands. The orange line on the graph represents the average in Massachusetts, and in FY17, that average was $15,918.07. So there was a gap at that time between what Attleboro was spending per pupil and what the state on average was spending per pupil of, roughly $2,500. If you take that difference and you multiply that by the number of students we have here in Attleboro, what you see is that in FY17, Attleboro received $16 million less than it would have if it was funded at an average level. Again, average. The average, the average per pupil expenditure in Massachusetts is roughly, when you rank spending across the districts, is the average is ranked 179 out of 330 districts, right? So slightly better than halfway, right? But what that implies is that there are about 150 districts that spend more than the average, and there's just under 180 who spend less than the average. Attleboro's per pupil expenditure is ranked in the bottom decile, right? In FY21, it was 33 out of 330. Right? We are at the bottom in the state for our per pupil expenditure. And that's enough of a problem, because what that's saying is that in the Commonwealth, we have to meet the same laws, we're judged under the same accountability system, we have to meet the same regulations, we have the exact same expectations as all 330 other districts, right? But we're asked to accomplish those results with, again, in 17, $16 million less than what the average in the state is working with. The more concerning part to me is that as much as SOA was supposed to help address some of these inequities, and as much as the city has continued to incrementally do what it could do and increased the amount of spending that it's doing for the schools, this gap has only grown in the last 5 years. Up to, and again, in FY21, you have Attleboro's per pupil of $15,329, Massachusetts at $19,113. The gap between those numbers has grown, resulting in a gap between us and average of 23 million, right? That's more, 23 million is more than 25% of what that year's budget was, right? This is a hugely significant amount of money in terms of the proportion of what we are spending that other districts have and are able to utilize to meet the requirements that we are being asked to meet as well. And my concern here is that if this continues, that the gap exists is a testament to how strong of a school district we have, that we produce the results that we do at this disadvantage. And I want to be very clear that if anyone in Attleboro wants to express some thanks to the people who get this done, it's the teachers, right? Because they're the ones that have to do the job with less than their counterparts get in other districts. They are dealing with less. All of us have to deal with less, but it's the teachers who are in the classroom with the kids and have the greatest impact of what this disparity creates. And as bad as that is, we take pride that we do our best to get every last penny out of all of these dollars, to do the good work that we do. We're very proud of the education that we provide. But as this gap continues to grow, at some point we hit a breaking point that we cannot continue to deliver what I think everyone reasonably expects on funds that are so much less than what a reasonable school district would be able to produce to support the people who are being asked to do this work. And it's no one's fault in this room, and I don't blame really anyone in the city either. This is a product of a system that is not of our creation. But we as a community have to acknowledge this problem exists, and that it is getting worse, and that at some point it catches up with us, right? And, as a community, I think we have to think about the implications of that and make some hard decisions about what we're going to do as a response to that. Because, very soon, the cherry sheet will come out, a number will come out, it'll either be surprisingly good, and Mark and I will be tickled, and we'll do our best to spend the money as wisely as we can, or it'll be, short of what we want, and, we'll be disappointed, but we'll get out we'll sharpen the pencils and do everything we can to make it not feel so bad. But while this is going on, the frog is being boiled, right? We cannot continue to do this and fall farther and farther behind without it at some point catching up to us. And I don't think I have done a good enough job as your superintendent in making this point to the community, and I just wanted to take tonight as my opportunity to ring the alarm bell that there is a real problem that if it doesn't magically fix itself, is going to catch up with us. This is unsustainable.
Okay.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. Is there anything that we could do from, the city side? Is it the formula? Is it, lobbying on the state? I mean, what's the solution here? Is it making a decision as a community that more funds need to be allocated towards the school, which would make cutting services elsewhere? Or what are other communities doing?
They're spending more money on the schools than is required. So to answer your question, a piece of this is that the formula that sets the net school spending number, which is the floor for the conversation, was an algorithm that was created in 1993, right? I don't know the details of that well enough. In fact, I don't think very few people do. But I suspect that some of the basic assumptions built into that formula have not kept up or haven't sort of paced out as effectively as they need to. Because in a world where only the very, very poorest communities, not even the poorest communities, because the poorest communities get extra support from the state. So only the what I call the tweeners like ourselves that aren't poor enough to get extra funding from the state, but aren't wealthy enough to just pony up the extra money. Communities like Attleboro are at the bottom of the bucket, spending just above or at, the very lowest ones are just spending that number. That the vast majority of the state spends well above that number. Significantly above that number, tens of millions of dollars over that number, suggests to me that number is no longer a meaningful number, right? Nobody's paying any attention to it. Nobody thinks that that's the number that reflects what it costs to run a school district in 2023. Everyone knows that number is no longer meaningful in terms of setting a mark for what appropriate funding looks like, which is what it was for the first, 20 years of ed reform. So a piece of it is that. Now, SOA was supposed to help with that. But as we learned immediately once the first numbers came out, I guess I should have paid closer attention. There were a lot of communities who were ringing the alarm bell saying SOA is just going to create haves and have-nots, and a lot of money is going to go to a couple places. And a lot of communities who knew they weren't going to get anything objected to SOA. I mistakenly thought, and I certainly wasn't alone in this, that we were assured that Attleboro was going to be a beneficiary. And we did get some funds. I mean, some places got nothing and we got some. But it wasn't it hasn't made things better. In fact, we've fallen farther behind. So SOA has been a disappointment, even though it did help. How about this? We'd be in a much worse situation if that hadn't happened. So, I mean, that's a piece of it that didn't quite deliver. And no, I don't think the city needs, I mean, the city needs to spend more, but the city doesn't have more, is, I think, the problem. You know, if the city would have to eliminate departments and have devastating cuts at its major departments to even approach coming up with the kind of money that we're talking about, it's not realistic. Based on the resources that the city has, it's unimaginable to meet these kinds of numbers. And I just want to be clear, as much as, you know, the number is 23 million, the needs assessment that we've been doing for almost 10 years now, I mean, we come in at just under 10 million. You know, we're saying, you know, we could deliver an excellent education sustainably at $10 million more, which is less than half of what, again, average. I'm not even suggesting we need to be average. I'm just saying we've got to be a little bit less, you know, under average, right? So, you know, what's the solution? Either the city has to decide that this is who we are and that the children of Attleboro deserve less, and that's just the way it is because that's the way the system works and there's nothing that we can do about it. Or the city has to do some planning about how it's going to change its available funds to devote to the schools. Because, again, in defense of the city, they don't have it now if they wanted to. If they wanted to fix this problem in FY24, they couldn't do it. And, you know, that's an unenviable problem for us to have as a community. But, you know, largely, I think, you know, not all parents, certainly, you know, if you're on social media, there are critics. But I think most of our families are happy with the education they're getting, are happy with the experience. You know, they know that their teachers are working hard and care, and that we do a lot of good things, and we offer a lot of things that, you know, you don't get in other school districts. So it's easy to kind of lose sight of the fact that we're hurtling towards a pretty significant catastrophe when it doesn't feel that way, because I think, again, our educators are picking up the slack in a serious way.
Mr. Larson?
I'm thinking about the 179th, the average city or town. Can we find out who that is? I guess where I'm heading is, it would be interesting to find out who that is, and then to get a copy of their budget and see as a percentage what that city and town is spending within their budget to be average.
Yeah, we could certainly do a pretty significant analysis of.
No, I mean, I'm just, you know, I don't want to do 10. I'm just
Well,
kind
no,
of curious if we could find like one or two that are like the average, you know,
Yeah, no.
what represents the middle?
They are, it's, again,
And-
right on the website, it's ranked, and we can definitely do that. I think I should note that part of this is demographic. A lot of our neighbors are with us at the bottom of the barrel in
Oh,
terms
yeah.
of per
No,
pupil
no.
expenditure.
But I guess where I'm heading is, you know, I know what our city's budget is. And we've very well documented where we are in that, and I agree. In order to make up the difference that we're looking for, we've got to close 3 departments. We've been down that analysis before. I guess what I'm trying to help with the message is that, you know, this is where Attleboro is. We're spending, you know, 55% of our budget citywide on education, and we're at 33. The average city and town in Massachusetts, who is at 179 out of 330, has a budget of this. They're spending this much on it. I mean, I'd like to know, in order to become average, do you need to spend 75% of your budget on education? Do you need to spend 80? Do you need to spend 60? I mean, I guess this is a great spot. I need something else to compare it to.
Sure.
And I think, you know, whoever is the average person in the state would be an interesting place to start and look. And you're right, we don't have to get all the way to average, but it would be interesting to see
Yeah.
what the average looks like versus what we look like.
To go from the bottom decile to the second from the bottom, if we went from 33 to 66, that would be an increase in our budget of $6 million. You know, we'd be 2/3 of the way towards, you know, where we're saying we need to be. So you're right, we don't have to climb the whole mountain. Although I have to say that I think there is a bit of an injustice here that we've created a system that, you know, has such disparity in its results. But that said, I'm a realist, and we, you know, yeah, we work hard to produce what we do with what we have. But yes, we don't need it all, and you know, we'll do the most with what we get, but we'll happily produce that analysis.
Mr. Guys?
Thank you, Mr. Withers. So we have a $23 million gap between us and the average district. Your needs assessment is $9.6 million, about $8 million of which is full-time employees in a variety of different areas across the district, whether it's administrative support, paraprofessionals, classroom educators. Of those 80, or those 160 staff, that $8 million, how, I guess, the critic of this list would say this is just Dave Sawyer asking Santa for too much at the holidays. What are you basing the assessment on in each instance? Like I noticed the K through 4 classroom size goal of 22, middle school 25, high school 25 as district targets. So is that district targets because that's what Attleboro believes, or is that just educationally? Like, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to class size, the research, you know, you can find research to support different views on what the best class size is. We can also look at class sizes in other districts, and ours are high, but there are other places that are higher. I would say the average is lower than us, because obviously the average has all this money that's they spend on teachers. Right. How do we come up with these numbers? We talked about, and we did this with educators, we did this with the union. We set targets that we think are reasonable and that would make a difference in terms of our ability to deliver on outcomes. And, you know, in that estimate, there's all kinds of things that go into how we do it. Like, you know, one of the things we're just discussing today, there's 4 reading specialists in there. You know, we don't have reading specialists at the middle school or the high school. So, you know, we want to provide reading services because we have students who are not reading at grade level past elementary school where we do have that service. You know, so, you know, that's like an identified need, one that we accommodate in other ways these days, but we think that would improve our ability to help, you know, not an insignificant number of students who need a support that right now we don't have the right thing to give them. And so the needs assessment is a list of things that, again, if you look at other communities, you know, they would have these things, and we don't. And, you know, I don't think, you know, I don't think everyone should be exactly the same, and that's not the suggestion here. But there are basic ideas of you know, what's fair, and I don't see how it's fair that we're judged the same way and have to meet the same requirements and have to follow the same laws, and yet the resources we get are so significantly different. That I don't see how this is fair. And I'm not crying foul as in like, we're not up for the job. I mean, I've worked at Attleboro my whole career. This isn't new. And this is what we do. And this is why we take great pride in what we do. But I also think it's time that somebody say, why is this okay? And by the way, point out that as it gets worse and worse and worse, at some point there is a breaking point.
Absolutely. And I think to Mr. Larson's point earlier about our situation compared to the average district, I think it would be interesting to see what the average district's class size is compared to Attleboro. Does the average district have as many special education students as Attleboro, and what services are they able to provide compared to us? ELL student services compared to Attleboro. I think that would, not that I think we need much more validation to this side of the argument, but I think it would validate this assessment a little bit further for anyone that is suspect of what our situation is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, but on a certain level, I don't know how someone who sees that we're funded at a level that's, projects out to a $23 million difference, how do you object to the notion that we're saying we're $10 million short? Because,
Right.
technically I can prove that we're $23 million short.
Yeah. But you're not asking for 23. That's the key. I mean, you could use it, I'm sure.
We would do some pretty amazing things with that kind of money.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next, minutes from our November 21st, 2022 meeting. Minutes were circulated with your packet. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or edits? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Consent agenda tonight, 3 items. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $17.50 to the class of 2025 from Custom Ink. Motion to accept the contractual obligation in the amount of $124.80 from Planet Aid Inc. as broken down on the check receipt dated November 18th, 2022. Motion to accept the contractual obligation in the amount of $812.67 from Shutterfly Life Touch LLC to Wamsutta Middle School.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Open forum. Anyone like to address the committee at open forum tonight? All right, I'll close open forum. Any new business? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.